Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going way beyond just lucid dreaming. We're exploring this whole world that Michael Raduga calls the phase. It's based on his YouTube series, Leave Your Body in 3 Days. And it kind of flips the script on how we usually think about these experiences.
You know, what's really cool about Raduga's approach is that he focuses on what you can achieve in the phase, not just the label we slap on it. It's less about the woo-woo stuff and more about asking, what can I actually do with this?
Yeah, I love that. It's all about practicality, right? So we're talking about a whole spectrum of experiences, right? Not just the classic floating outside your body kind of thing.
Exactly. The phase can be anything from subtle sensations to those super realistic lucid experiences that some people describe as out-of-body travel or even near-death experiences. It's really a sliding scale, and what's interesting is that even Raduga's own view of the phase has changed over his 16 years of practicing it.
Huh. That's really interesting. It almost makes me think of it as a skill you can develop. Speaking of which, how do we actually get into this phase? Is there like a secret password or something?
Haha, no secret password. But there are definitely techniques. Raduga talks about direct and indirect methods. The direct method is kind of like trying to push open a really heavy door. You're actively trying to separate from your body while you're lying in bed.
Okay, got it. So what's the heavy door in this metaphor?
It's that barrier between your waking consciousness and the phase state. It relies on what Raduga calls dips, or sometimes he calls them microsleeps. These are those tiny moments where you actually lose consciousness for a split second and then come back.
Whoa, hold on a second. Microsleeps. I think our listeners might need a bit more explanation on those. They sound almost impossible to catch.
You're right, they are super subtle. But think about it. Haven't you ever kind of zoned out for a second while you were reading or even driving? Those are microsleeps, those little glitches where our awareness just flickers for a moment.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we've all had those moments.
Right.
So you're saying these microsleeps are happening all the time, and that they're actually the key to getting into the phase.
Exactly. Raduga suggests that they happen naturally, especially when we're tired, and they create these tiny cracks in our waking consciousness, you know, like little openings.
Oh, wow, I'm starting to get it. It's like a back door into the phase, if you know how to use it, that is.
Precisely. One technique that Raduga mentions is called phantom wiggling. It's where you imagine your limbs moving even though it's like you're tricking your mind into thinking you're already partly out of your body and you're taking advantage of that microsleep moment to slip into the phase.
Whoa, that's wild. It almost sounds like a way of hijacking those little brain glitches. What about the indirect method? How's that different?
Well, the indirect method is a bit more like stepping through a door that's already ajar. You're not pushing as hard. It uses the phase state that naturally happens when we wake up. It's all about catching that wave of phase consciousness before it crashes, you know? Taking immediate action as you wake up to slip into the phase.
Okay, that does sound a bit easier. You're not forcing it, but more like realizing you're already partly there.
Exactly. And Raduga says this method is often more effective because the door is already open, so to speak.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we've managed to enter the phase, either by sneaking through the back door or catching that wave. How do we make it last? What prevents us from just snapping back to reality? Or worse, falling back asleep?
That's where deepening techniques come in. Raduga really emphasizes something called sensory amplification. It's all about intensifying the experience. Touching, scrutinizing, really immersing yourself in all the sensations to make the phase as vivid and stable as possible.
So it's like feeding on the sensory details of the phase to kind of anchor yourself there?
Yes. And the sensations in the phase can be incredibly intense, even more so than in real life. It's like your senses are on overdrive, which actually helps to keep you grounded in the experience.
Wow, okay, so we're grounded, but what about falling asleep? I feel like I'd be so relaxed in the phase that I'd just drift off.
That's a valid concern, and Raduga actually has this counterintuitive technique for that. It's called forced falling asleep. It sounds kind of crazy, but the idea is to pretend you're falling asleep within the phase, just for a few seconds. It's like a mini reboot that resets the experience and actually prevents you from actually drifting off.
That is wild. It's like a power nap for your consciousness within the phase itself.
Yeah. He compares it to that feeling when you're super tired and you only have a few minutes to rest. You know, you kind of abruptly relax and you surrender to that drowsiness. But you catch yourself before you actually fall asleep.
Wow, I can totally relate to that feeling. Definitely going to have to try that. So we've talked about getting into the phase and making it last. But the big question is, what do we do there? What's the point of all this?
That's the really exciting part. According to Raduga, the phase isn't just about having these trippy experiences. He says you can use it to gather information, solve problems, even improve your health and well-being.
Wait, hold on. You're saying we can actually learn things in the phase that are useful in real life. I need to hear more about this.
Oh, absolutely. Raduga suggests that you can gather information in the phase by interacting with objects, both animate and inanimate. Imagine asking a question and getting the answer from a book, or even surfing the internet within the phase.
Whoa, the internet in the phase. That's next level.
Right. He gives this example of an engineer who was stuck on this design problem for weeks. He goes into the phase and visualizes the robotic hand he's working on, and suddenly the solution just clicks. He literally sees the missing piece in his mind.
That's incredible. But how do you know if what you're getting in the phase is actually true? What if it's just your imagination running wild?
That's where things get even more interesting. Raduga is really big on the step of verification. He's adamant that you test any information you get against real-life facts. Don't blindly accept anything you encounter in the phase as absolute truth.
So it's like a research project.
Yeah.
You're gathering data in the phase, but then testing it in the real world.
Exactly. And he also points out that the type of goal you set influences the results. Practical goals, like the engineer's problem, are more likely to give you reliable information than, say, abstract tests, like trying to predict playing cards.
So it's about using the phase for tangible outcomes, not just messing around. What else can we do in the phase besides gathering information?
Raduga suggests we can actually impact our real-life physiology. He believes that practicing a skill in the phase can improve your performance in real life. Remember how our brains form new neural pathways when we learn something? Well, he thinks the same thing happens when we do an action repeatedly in the phase, even though our physical body is moving.
So it's like mental rehearsal, but way more intense and realistic, because your brain is totally immersed in the experience.
Exactly. It's like a virtual training ground for your mind and body. Raduga even suggests trying things like drinking alcohol in the phase to experience the realistic effects, which he believes might even linger after you return to your body.
Whoa, that's trippy. Hold on a sec. Is there any scientific basis for any of this, or is this all just theoretical?
That's what I love about Raduga. He tries to connect the phase to what we know about the brain and nervous system. He has these fascinating theories about how the phase taps into the brain's ability to control the autonomic nervous system, the system that regulates things like our heart rate and digestion.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. Tell me more about this scientific connection. This is where things get truly deep.
Well, Raduga points out that our brains don't always distinguish between real and imagined experiences. He cites this groundbreaking research on cats that showed their visual cortex, the part of the brain that processes sight, actually switches to analyzing signals from their internal organs during sleep.
Wait, so when cats are asleep, their brains are basically seeing their own bodies from the inside out?
That's what the research suggests. And Raduga believes this might explain why we get sick when we don't get enough sleep. If the brain doesn't get a chance to monitor and regulate the body's internal systems through those internal signals, things can start to go haywire.
That's incredible. It makes you wonder just how much power our minds really have over our bodies.
Yeah.
We need to take a pause here. This is some mind-blowing stuff. We'll be back soon to dive deeper into this connection between the phase and our physiology. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the phase. We've been talking about all sorts of things, like how to slip into this altered state of consciousness, those microsleep doorways, and even how to make the experience last longer. But now I'm really curious about what we can actually do in the phase. It's not just about hanging out in this weird hyper-real world, right?
No, not at all. This is where Raduga's practical approach is really powerful. He's all about having a clear plan of action before you even try to enter the phase. It's like you need a mission, a specific goal in mind, rather than just kind of wandering around aimlessly.
Oh. That makes sense. So it's like prepping for a research expedition, but for your own consciousness.
Exactly. And that preparation applies to everything: deepening the experience, gathering information, even trying to influence your real-life physiology. Raduga suggests that having a clear intention helps you maintain consciousness, resist distractions, and really maximize your time in the phase.
Okay, I can see how that would be important. But what does a good phase plan actually look like? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Raduga suggests starting simple. Your plan could be something like, I'm going to enter the phase, go directly to the mirror, examine my reflection, and then eat an apple.
Okay. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty basic.
Right. But having that roadmap, even for a simple action, helps anchor you in the experience. As you get more skilled, you can set more complex goals, like practicing a specific skill or exploring a particular question. But that foundation of intention is key.
Got it. So it's all about setting those intentions
Yes.
beforehand. Okay, you mentioned something about impacting real-life physiology earlier. How does that fit into a phase plan?
Let's say you have a fear of public speaking. You could create a phase plan where you practice giving a speech in front of a crowd, really vividly experiencing that scenario in your mind.
Oh, wow. So it's like exposure therapy, but without any of the real-world consequences?
Yeah.
I can see how that could be super powerful.
Exactly. Or let's say you're trying to break a bad habit. You could visualize yourself resisting the temptation in a really realistic setting. By repeatedly doing the desired action in the phase, you're strengthening those neural pathways, making it more likely you'll actually behave that way in real life.
It's like training your brain in a virtual reality simulator.
That's a great analogy, and Raduga believes you can apply this to physical sensations as well. Feeling tired. Try visualizing yourself feeling super energized in the phase. Flood your senses with that feeling of vitality.
This is incredible. It sounds like the possibilities are endless. But earlier we were talking about gathering information in the phase, and you mentioned how it's really important to verify anything you learn there. Why is that so crucial? It's not like I'm going to cite the phase in a research paper, haha.
Haha, right. But it's still about being able to tell the difference between truth and illusion. Remember, your mind is creating this entire experience. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing everything you see or hear.
Yeah, okay, I get it. It's kind of like browsing the internet. You don't just believe every headline or every social media post.
Precisely. So how do we separate fact from fiction in the phase? You need a good BS detector.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually do that? How do we tell what's real and what's not in the phase?
Well, Raduga suggests a few methods. One is to cross-reference the information with what you already know to be true in real life. If something in the phase contradicts your existing knowledge, that's a big red flag.
It's like a reality check within a reality check.
Exactly. Another method is to actually test the information within the phase itself. Let's say an object tells you something. Well, try interacting with it in a way that would confirm or deny what it said. Raduga also talks about the importance of staying detached and objective, the more emotionally invested you are in a particular outcome.
The more likely you are to kind of influence the experience.
Yeah.
To create a self-fulfilling prophecy, basically.
Exactly. It's like conducting a scientific experiment. You want to minimize bias as much as possible and stay open to possibilities, even if they challenge your assumptions.
This is also thought-provoking. It really makes you question what's real and what's not. Now, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, Raduga's scientific theories. I'm really fascinated by this connection between the phase, brain activity, and the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. What's fascinating is how he looks at how our brains operate in these different states of consciousness. He points out that even our waking reality isn't as stable as we think. We're constantly experiencing fluctuations in our mood, energy, focus.
It's like we're all on this mini roller coaster of consciousness all the time without even realizing it.
Haha, exactly. And Raduga suggests that the phase certainly magnifies those fluctuations, makes them more apparent. He also believes it gives us access to a deeper level of control over the autonomic nervous system, which usually runs on autopilot, right?
You mean like how we were talking about potentially feeling the effects of alcohol in the phase, even though you haven't actually had a drink?
Yes. That's a perfect example. Raduga believes that by consciously directing our thoughts and intentions in the phase, we can actually influence those automatic responses. It's like taking manual control over a system that's usually on cruise control.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. So what does all this mean for someone who's just starting to explore the phase? It sounds kind of intimidating, like there's so much to learn and master.
Ultimately, Raduga's message is one of empowerment. He truly believes that everyone has the potential to experience the phase and use it for personal growth and understanding. But it does take practice, patience, and a willingness to let go of our preconceived notions about what the phase should be.
So it's not about achieving some mystical state or proving anything to anyone. It's about personal discovery and what the phase can offer you. I really like that. But before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on one more thing that Raduga mentions. The possibility of encountering other beings in the phase. What's his take on that?
Well, Raduga definitely acknowledges that a lot of people report encounters with other entities in the phase, but he cautions against getting too caught up in their nature or their origins. He emphasizes that the phase is ultimately a projection of your own mind.
So any beings that we encounter are basically creations of our own subconscious.
That's his perspective.
Yeah.
He suggests focusing on how those encounters make you feel and what you can learn from them, rather than trying to analyze their objective reality. After all, we interact with other beings all the time in our waking lives, right? Whether it's people, animals, or even plants.
Right, and we don't usually stop to question their existence or demand proof of their origins. It's just part of the experience.
Exactly. He encourages us to approach those encounters with the same open-minded curiosity. He even suggests that the phase might blur the lines between individual and collective consciousness, hinting at this deeper interconnectedness that we're only beginning to understand.
Whoa, that's deep. It suggests that the phase isn't just about exploring our own minds, but maybe even connecting to something larger than ourselves. We'll definitely have to explore that idea further. But for now, I think we need to give our listeners a moment to digest all this incredible information. We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive into the phase with Michael Raduga. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of the phase with Michael Raduga, and wow, we've covered a lot: techniques, applications, the science behind it all, even those kind of mind-bending encounters with other beings. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. You know, what's really stuck with me throughout all this is how much Raduga emphasizes practicality. He's not just interested in the theory or the mystery of it all. He wants us to actually use the phase, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He keeps bringing it back to how the phase can actually make our lives better, help us solve problems, even improve our health and well-being. It's incredibly empowering.
It really is. And he's even a bit cautious about getting too hung up on labels like lucid dreaming or astral projection. He actually thinks those terms can limit our understanding.
So it's not about what we call it, it's about the experience itself.
Absolutely. He encourages us to just focus on those core elements. You know, that heightened awareness, the control we can have over the dream environment, and the potential to actually bring those insights and benefits back into our everyday lives. It's about what you do with it, not just what you call it.
I love that. It really shifts the perspective. You know, one thing I'm still trying to wrap my head around is this whole idea of dips or microsleeps, as Raduga sometimes calls them. They're so fleeting, so subtle. How can something so small be so important for entering the phase?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of how our minds work, you know, especially at that edge of consciousness. Raduga believes that these microsleeps create this tiny crack in our normal waking awareness, just a brief window where we can slip into that phase state.
It's like those moments right before you fall asleep when your thoughts start to get all jumbled and surreal.
Yeah, exactly. But what he emphasizes is that we don't need to force these dips or try to control them. They happen naturally throughout the day, especially when we're tired or relaxed. The trick is to become aware of them, to recognize them as potential entry points into the phase.
So it's like becoming a microsleep ninja. Learning to spot those moments when our minds are already halfway there.
I love that. That's a great analogy. He compares it to catching a wave, you know. You need to be in the right place at the right time and have the skill to ride it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But how do you actually catch a microsleep? It sounds almost impossible to notice something that subtle.
It takes practice, for sure, and a really heightened sense of self-awareness. Raduga suggests paying attention to those times when your mind starts to wander, your thoughts get all fuzzy, or you just feel a sudden wave of drowsiness.
Those moments when you're zoning out but not quite asleep yet? Yeah, I definitely know that feeling.
Exactly. And he's clear that these aren't full-blown sleep episodes, just these brief little lapses in consciousness. And it's in those gaps, those momentary disconnections from waking reality, that the potential for the phase emerges.
So it's like we're constantly teetering on the edge of two worlds, and these microsleeps are the bridge between them.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And with practice, Raduga believes we can learn to recognize those moments, those threshold moments, and actually use them to our advantage. He even suggests that these microsleeps might be happening way more often than we realize.
Really? You mean we might be experiencing them all the time without even knowing it?
Think about it all those times when you're driving on a long, boring road, or sitting in a meeting that's just dragging on, or even just staring out the window, lost in thought.
Yeah, those mind on autopilot moments. I do that all the time.
Those are prime opportunities for microsleeps. And if we train ourselves to recognize them, we might be able to turn those totally mundane moments into gateways to the phase.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It's like there are these hidden portals all around us just waiting to be discovered. So if there's one thing that our listeners take away from this deep dive into the phase, what would you say it is?
I think the most important message is that the phase isn't some distant mystical realm that's only for a select few. It's a natural human potential, and it's within reach of anyone who's willing to explore the depths of their own consciousness.
And it's not just about having these cool out there experiences. It's about actually using the phase to make our lives better, whether that's solving problems, boosting creativity, or even improving our health and well-being.
Exactly. It's about pushing those boundaries of what we think is possible, both within ourselves and in our understanding of reality.
It's about realizing that we're capable of so much more than we might imagine. So what are you waiting for? Dive in and see what you discover. Until next time, keep exploring the extraordinary within the ordinary.